Hello, everyone. Welcome. Just starting here and getting things launched. So come in and pause for a second while we let everyone shuffle in. Feel free to use the chat option on your right-hand side to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Okay, I just got a message that somebody can't hear.
Somebody can't hear.
We've got some answers coming in of people, who they are and where they're from. So I think the audio on our end is working.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We're just giving people a couple minutes to get in here. We invite everyone to use the chat to say hello and where you're from. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. We're going to give a couple more minutes. Got San Diego here, Arizona, New York. Where are you guys tuning in from? And if you're not familiar, there should be a GoToWebinar control panel on your right-hand side, and there should be a chat option where you're able to type in a message. Hopefully you guys can see that.
We have a lot of California, Ohio, Montana, Idaho, Pennsylvania, across the board here.
Just give another minute or two for people to tune in. Awesome. We have a vet here with Lost Paws Rescue of Texas. You see Anna from Nevada, Iowa. Couple Idaho. Everyone came out from Idaho today. Welcome. All right. Well, I see people still joining in. Feel free to continue dropping a hello to everybody in that chat option. But I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Everyone's dropping in their name in the chat here, and a big shout out to all our members. If you're a Shelters United member, hello and welcome. We're happy to have you here today. My name's Mariah. I'll be your MC for today, and I manage the marketing communications here at Shelters United. And today we have a fun webinar, Poop the webinar. We're going to be talking about overcoming gut issues for healthier pets and lower return rates, presented by Shelters United in collaboration with our partners at BLUE Natural Veterinary Diets. And just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and type them into this question box you see on that GoToWebinar control panel. We'll have Tali Schwartz, my partner in marketing crime. She's going to bring up all the questions, and she'll be bringing those up during the presentations, and we'll have some dedicated slides after our presenters where you can ask some specific questions. And without further ado, why don't we go ahead and begin the webinar by reviewing today's agenda. On the next slide, we'll see the agenda here. We're going to have a welcome from Shelters United. We're going to go into reviewing some common gastrointestinal issues that are affecting digestion and absorption. We'll discuss the benefits of a therapeutic diet. We'll compare some key nutrients of BLUE Natural Veterinary Diets, Hill's Science Diet, Royal Canin, and the Purina Pro Plan Veterinary Diets. And then at the end, we'll also be talking about how we can turn limitations like health into opportunities for effective adoption marketing. On the next slide, you'll see Danielle. If you're a Shelters United member, you might know Danielle. She is a registered veterinary technician for 24 years. She spent most of her tech career in emergency critical care and specialty surgery. She's worked as a sales rep in the veterinary industry for a total of 18 years, working for Midmark, and covered the 7 states of the West. She's worked for Securos, a division of MWI, as a territory manager for Antech Diagnostics, also as a trainer for the Hills to Home platform, and also as an inventory manager for a very large specialty practice in Las Vegas. Now she's a member services consultant for Shelters United. She's the mother of 2 teenage boys, 1 rescue dog, and 2 ornery cats. Please help me in welcoming Danielle.
Thank you, Mariah, for that introduction. I appreciate it. Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're glad you're here today. Like she said, I am Danielle. I'm a registered veterinary technician and now a member consultant for Shelters United. Shelters United is the only group purchasing organization for nonprofit animal welfare organizations just like you. You can think of us as a buying group specific to animal welfare organizations. We are passionate about helping animal welfare organizations keep as much of your hard-earned money as possible so that you can help more animals in your organizations. We work with manufacturers to obtain discounts on thousands of products you already use and purchase every day. With these discounts, last year our members saved $1.4 million and an average of $1,857 per organization. Just imagine what you could do with those savings. Angela Stell, who hopefully is on our webinar today from NM Dog, is using her savings to hire a new part-time employee. Some of our manufacturer partners include MWI Animal Health, our group's distribution partner, Impex, who has brought you programs over the last 35 years, like Rally to Rescue, Pet Telethons, and Homeless Homer, and more. Securos Surgical Supplies, Capinovet, an affordable option for flea and tick prevention, AWA, the Association for Animal Welfare Advancement, the leading organization for animal welfare organizations like you to find continuing education, networking opportunities, lectures, and many more. Verbac Animal Health, they offer a wide range of medicated shampoos, ear cleaners, and affordable options in flea, tick, and heartworm. MWI Office Supplies for your office supplies and break room supplies. If you didn't know, you do have that option with MWI Office Supplies. And finally, our partner and host for today, BLUE Natural Veterinary Diets, who's leading today's discussion.
Leading our conversation today is Dr. Bretaigne Jones from BLUE Natural Veterinary Diets. Dr. Jones earned her veterinary degree at the University of Missouri. She owned her own clinic for several years before joining the state's veterinary office in Missouri for 8 years to administer disease control programs. She's also worked for Central Missouri Humane Society for 2 years. For 12 years, Dr. Jones has been dedicated to the therapeutic nutrition in dogs and cats, working first with Royal Canin and now Blue Buffalo. I'm excited to introduce you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, I'm happy to be able to spend time with you all and share some information on how nutrition can affect a more positive outcome in a shelter and rescue setting. Next, please. So, as you all know, the shelters and rescues have some unique issues. Animals come in every day with unknown histories, vague backgrounds of exposure. They may be relinquished, they may be found feral, they may be coming from another facility. So you've got a variety of situations coming into your facility that not only do you have to treat that individual animal, but you also have to take care of all of the animals under your care. And shelters are unique. They're not like kennels or veterinary clinics or breeding facilities. You all have different goals, you've got different resources available, and certainly different populations. You know, many times in a shelter situation, you have to put the herd health as a primary care concern and the individual animal secondary because of infectious contagious diseases that can move through your population. So it's particularly challenging, and having worked in that environment, I know what it is that you deal with on a daily basis. Open admission shelters are particularly challenged. These are situations where whenever animals are brought in, they have to accept them regardless if they're at full capacity already. There's a high turnover of animals, and you deal with population density issues on a daily basis. And given to that, when you look at the animals that are coming into your care, many of these animals have already changed addresses several times. Maybe they were relinquished from their owners and they've gone into one shelter and then out to fosters, maybe to another foster, maybe into a breed-specific rescue organization. So these animals may have been in several different facilities before they come to you. So the one thing you can pretty well say is there's not a common situation for every animal. Now, nutrition can be a tremendous friend and benefit for you. It can make a huge difference. It is a basic critical component of any shelter or rescue's wellness plan. It's essential not only for the maintenance of good health, but to get those animals that are dealing with health issues back into a good health status. One of the things we see in a shelter environment can be that the food that they get is not always consistent. We know that dogs and cats are less capable of handling frequent dietary changes. And so if we can stay as consistent as possible in what we're feeding them, we're going to see a better improvement over time, and the benefits are significant. Especially when they first come to you, these animals are going to be stressed. And that's, you know, on top of usually several other issues, whether they're infectious or have parasites or, you know, malnutrition, whatever. But it's, you know, from the time they come in to the time we get that animal adopted out, we really need to try to get them on a consistent diet and help them get to a healthy status quickly. Next. So as you guys know, I'm not telling you anything new, but you have, you know, a particular situation in that you're not just feeding one animal or maybe 4 or 5 animals, but hundreds. Now, size-wise, there can be a huge difference. Now, cats, that's a rather homogeneous population. You don't have that much size variation in the cat side of it, but on the dog side, you certainly do. You know, you can have that 3-pound Yorkie or the 200-pound Mastiff. And while they all have the same anatomy, that anatomy does not function the same way across the sizes. Small dogs are much more prone to be constipated, whereas the large and giant breeds are prone to softer stools and diarrhea. And a part of that is because if you feed a meal at the same time to a 30-pound dog and a 150-pound dog, the meal that 30-pound dog ate is going to get pooped out in about 24 hours. But the meal that 150-pound dog ate is actually going to take over twice that amount of time before it works its way through the gastrointestinal system. And that impacts that stool quality and how the animal adjusts to dietary changes. Aside from just the size issue, you also have different life stages. You may have a litter of newborn or weanling pups and kittens that need a lot of energy, can be 3 times what they would require as an adult. And as they go through the different stages of until they reach their adult age, that's going to change. Gradually those calorie needs are going to decrease. What a puppy needs at 4 months is different than what they need at 8 months and 12 months or 18 months when you're talking about a larger giant breed. So you have to be cognitive and adjust and address that issue as well. And of course, with the adults, if they're intact, they're going to have a higher calorie need than if they are spayed or neutered. And I know you get some pregnant animals in. Dogs in the last trimester, that's when their calorie needs really ramp up. And of course, when they're nursing, you've got a significant increase in calorie needs. Now, cats, if they're pregnant, actually from the time they get pregnant, their calorie needs go up. So, and yet another difference between cats and dogs. So you've got to look at all these different factors at the animals that you're trying to feed. And of course, if you've got an animal that comes in that's already been neutered, you know that you need to adjust their calorie intake down because they just don't need the same energy that an intact animal does. Next, please. And I know, again, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know that the gastrointestinal issues are among the most common that you address daily in your shelter or rescue setting. Some of the things we can do to help address this is to make sure we're feeding a highly digestible food. And this basically is referring to, you're going to feed a set amount of food, and how much of that food is actually going to be digested and absorbed that the animal is going to be using, and how much ends up as waste product. So overall, anything that's 85% and higher is considered highly digestible. Now, we can look at that in more detail and consider what the digestibility of the protein is going to be, what the fats are, what the carbohydrates are, because each of those, we call them macronutrients, each of those macronutrients has different characteristics that's going to impact how it's digested, how it's absorbed, and how readily available it is for the animal to use. For example, if we're talking about protein digestibility, meat source proteins generally have a better digestibility than plant source proteins. That doesn't mean that plant source proteins aren't good. It just means that you're going to see an altered digestibility according to what the source of that protein is. Then you also have the availability of what we call functional ingredients. And these are specific ingredients that can have a direct impact on the gastrointestinal tract. And we'll talk more detail about these, but I'll mention them right now. So prebiotic fibers, omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, total dietary fiber. These are things that can get a diseased gastrointestinal tract back into a normal health status because they function immediately at the site. Next, please. Now, when we talk about digestibility, we're talking about a two-phase situation. We're talking about digestion and absorption. Now, digestion a lot of times is used as kind of an umbrella term where, we're like, you eat it, the body breaks it down, you use it, that's digestion. And there's nothing wrong with using that as kind of an umbrella term, but really we have to be cognizant that there's more than one thing going on here. So digestion is actually breaking down the foodstuffs into their base units. So when we're breaking down proteins, and a protein may have 70,000 amino acids that make up that one protein molecule. Well, we're breaking it down into the individual amino acids so the body can use them. Fats get broken down to fatty acids, and carbohydrates get broken down into starches or sugars. Absorption is the next part, and that's where it's the process of getting those base units across the intestinal wall and either into the bloodstream or into the lymphatic system. And the lymphatic system is what carries fats around the body. So both systems, digestion and absorption, have to be working well to have optimal utilization of the food that's being fed. Next, please. And my slide's not advancing. I don't know if you guys are seeing yours advance or not. There we go. So what can interfere with digestion or absorption? Now, one of the things, and again, thinking for you all in the service industry you're in with shelters and rescues, but malnutrition, when you're picking up animals that are feral, have been homeless or have been neglected, that perhaps has been taken from the owner, malnutrition in and of itself can cause issues. The bacterial populations that live in the gut, the normal balance of those species and numbers are largely dependent on animals having regular meals and depending on what those meals consist of. Well, if they're not getting regular meals, then it's going to alter what's happening with those bacterial populations. Two, if you don't have food moving through the gut on a regular basis, then the muscular rhythm that moves food through the intestinal tract, called peristalsis, that gets off. And so it may be moving extremely slowly, which again is just kind of another complication. Also, if the animal's not eating on a regular basis, then the pancreas, which creates the digestive enzymes, doesn't get the stimulus to keep up the production and release of those digestive enzymes. And so when the animal does eat, it may not have the digestive enzymes readily available to make full use of whatever it is that they've eaten. Now, situations like intestinal parasites, viruses, various pathogenic bacteria, all of those things can affect the gut tissue, not only motility, but actually the integrity of the intestinal wall or the stomach wall. Definitely different depending on what specifically we're talking about. But we basically usually will see a result in vomiting or diarrhea or both as those tissues are damaged. And of course, this triggers an immune response. 70% of the immune system is in the gastrointestinal tract. And so when we have, whether it's parasites or infectious disease or even a malnutrition situation, the immune response not only is going to be triggered, but it can aggravate an existing situation with inflammatory cells. So all of this, anytime you have a change in the rate of passage through the gut, you may end up with a diarrhea situation. And something that often gets overlooked is stress. Fear can cause a range of symptoms or problems. They lose their appetite. Stress by itself can cause a wicked diarrhea. It can cause dehydration because if they're not eating, they're probably not drinking either. Or if they've got diarrhea, they may become dehydrated. And it's part of the fight or flight response. and it really ramps up their metabolism because they're not sure if they're going to have to run at a moment's notice. And that increased metabolism is burning energy that they may not have to spare. So all of these things you guys deal with on a daily basis with every animal that comes into your facility. Next, please. So when we're looking at what are the benefits we're looking for with a gastrointestinal diet, or a diet that's going to get these animals back to a normal state, I'm going to touch on each of these in greater depth in the coming slides, but of course we need essential nutrients. We're going to try to normalize the gut bacteria and get it back to the appropriate balance between good bacteria and bad bacteria. And we're going to do this utilizing prebiotics primarily, and some aspects of probiotics. And I know there's probably some questions about probiotics. Sometimes people get confused about what is a prebiotic and what's a probiotic. And I'll give you a real quick rule of thumb before we get into the more detail on that. Prebiotics, that E in the pre part stands for environment. Prebiotics are actually fermentable fibers that change the environment in the gut to support good bacteria. Probiotics, that O in the first part of it, stands for organisms. So these are actually viable organisms that are good. And they come in and they try to get established and they try to help control the levels of bad bacteria and reestablish the balance there. So we'll talk more about those. We want to try to support what's called the intestinal mucosa in recovery from whatever stress and damage has occurred. The mucosal layer is a layer that goes on the entire interior side of the intestinal wall, and it's a defensive layer. So when that gets damaged, it puts not only the intestinal tract at risk, but it may let some bugs in through the blood system and cause other issues. We need to reduce inflammation. We can approach that through use of omega-3 fatty acids. And we want to make sure that we try to get that animal to the optimal digestion and absorption of foodstuffs so we don't have undigested food getting down into the large intestine. Because how the small intestine deals with food stuff is way different than how the large intestine deals with it. So we've got to try to keep that to a minimum and not aggravate the situation. Next, please. So as we said, delivering essential nutrients, and this is necessary even in a healthy animal. But when you've got an animal that has some sort of disease state going on, we have to actually deliver some other key nutrients that help them repair tissues and return things to normal. So that bacterial population we were just talking about, any type of GI disease is going to change the balance of good bacteria against bad and the total number of bacteria. And there's thousands of different types of bacteria in the gut. So when something shifts within the GI tract to throw it off from its normal balance, the potentially pathogenic bacteria, any place they can get a foothold and take advantage, they're going to. So supporting the growth of the beneficial bacteria is a major goal in controlling GI disease. Supporting the intestinal recovery. This is where the use of those prebiotic fibers really come into play. And largely because when they are fermented by the gut bacteria, they produce what's called short chain fatty acids. And why those are important is they can act as a direct fuel source for the cells that line the intestinal tract. So they're not dependent on what the bloodstream brings them. They can get their food source right there. And if they keep getting the food they need, they can function at the highest level and get that gut back to a full normal functioning again and get back to a normal healthy status. Next, please. So why are the beneficial bacteria so important? Well, partly because one, it helps to keep the pathogenic bacteria into a controllable level so that they don't take over the intestinal tract. It also provides a natural defense barrier. So these good bacteria can cozy up next to the cells that line the large intestine and actually kind of create a barrier, making it more difficult for the pathogenic bacteria to attach to those cells and do damage. Those short chain fatty acids we mentioned earlier not only provide the energy for the intestinal cells, but when those cells are healthy and highly functional, they replicate, they replace each other, which enhances that cell growth. But it also increases the blood flow through the layers of the intestinal tissue, which is going to make it easier for that tissue to absorb electrolytes and water and nutrients. And it also promotes the normal muscular rhythm through the GI tract, so normal motility. Electrolytes, as I said, electrolytes and fluid balance, especially in large intestine, this is really what cuts down on the diarrhea in a lot of these cases. Another side effect of those good bacteria, when they are doing, whether it's foodstuffs that come down or the prebiotic fibers that they're eating, a side effect of their metabolism, they can actually synthesize some vitamins. So vitamins B1, B2, B6, and vitamin K. So those are coming from the good bacteria in the gut, which the animal then absorbs and can make use of. So not only are they getting these in the diet, they're also getting them directly from the gut and the good bacteria. And the beneficial bacteria too, we know through studies that it helps to enhance the immune function in the gut. And so much of our immune system is in the gut that that's really critical. Next, please. So these prebiotic fibers we're talking about, fibers are overall an indigestible carbohydrate source. In the gray graph in the top left corner, you'll see a number of different types of fibers listed there, and these are all fiber sources that are really commonly used in the pet food industry. You'll see on the vertical axis, it's rating from low fermentability to high fermentability, and on the horizontal axis, it's rating from low or insoluble to highly soluble. The fermentability and the solubility are very important in what the quality of a fiber is for prebiotic opportunity. So if we use a very low solubility, low fermentability fiber, we don't get very many short chain fatty acids, and then we end up kind of starving the gut cells because they're not getting the food that they need. On the other hand, if we use a very highly fermentable and highly soluble fiber source, we can end up with a lot of short chain fatty acids, but we also get a lot of gas production, and we may end up with diarrhea. So the key is finding that sweet balance spot of moderate fermentability, moderate solubility. And in our experience and our research, we found that a mixture of fibers is going to give us that sweet spot. And that's how we approach the prebiotic and fiber challenge in getting these animals back to a normal GI health. Next, please. I think we might see some additional information come up on that slide. So yeah, the soluble versus insoluble, and that just addresses how well it will dissolve in water, and fermentable is how readily the bacteria can work on them. So these are some of the aspects we consider when we choose what fiber sources to use in our diets. Next, please. And the last aspect for the benefit of a diet is reducing those unabsorbed nutrients. So by trying to have a highly digestible diet that's going to be readily absorbed, we reduce the amount of foodstuffs that are going to get all the way to the large intestine that then can have a very negative effect on the bacterial population. And that may include a diarrhea situation. We know that regardless of the cause of disease, normal digestion and absorption is often compromised in these individuals. Next, please. So there are some conditions, and we'll talk about more about individual condition situations, but some of them are going to actually respond better to a lower fat diet. So aside from our normal GI, we also have a low fat GI. And there's a reason for this. Fats are the most complex nutrient for the body to digest and absorb. It includes multiple organ systems and several different enzymatic activity cascades. So we're not just talking about the stomach and the small intestine, we're also talking about the pancreas that's going to make the enzymes, the liver and gallbladder, and the lymphatic system, which is going to carry any of the absorbed fat to the rest of the body. If something goes wrong in any of those systems, it can impact the ability for absorption or digestion and how the animal responds to the level of fat in the diet. When we have fat malabsorption, we can end up with a diarrhea and fluid loss situation because it can stimulate the large intestine or the colon to secrete water back into the lumen of the large intestine. It increases the permeability of that defense layer, the mucosal layer. And when we get holes in that mucosal barrier, things get through it, like viruses and bacteria. Intact proteins can get through, which can actually start the cause of food allergies. We can also see from that fat malabsorption, intestinal inflammation. And sometimes that inflammation gets out of hand and we end up with it infiltrating the gut wall. So there are several conditions that we kind of think of as low fat diet conditions. Now, this can include pancreatitis in dogs. Cats do not have a fat issue with pancreatitis, but dogs can. That's not to say that every case of pancreatitis has to have a low fat diet, but I think it's kind of the knee-jerk reaction is you diagnose an animal with pancreatitis is like, oh, I'm going to need a low-fat diet. Hyperlipidemia, that's when there's too much fat in the bloodstream, whether it's, hypertriglycerides or cholesterol, but there's too much fat in the bloodstream and it's interfering with the bloodstream's ability to do what it needs to do. Protein losing neuropathy, that could be through the kidney, it could be through the gut, but it's a condition that allows for the loss of protein that the animal can't reclaim. EPI is exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, which means the dog is not making, or cat, is not making the digestive enzymes they need, which makes it darn difficult for them to be able to digest and absorb food. So they may be eating buckets of food and losing weight. It's just one of the examples of a situation that may benefit from a lower fat diet. Next slide, please. Okay. So again, just to summarize, we're looking at the digestibility, and palatability is significantly important. You could offer them manna from heaven, and if they won't eat it, it won't help them. So palatability is not just a marketing claim. It's especially in therapeutic diets. It is so important, and so many animals, depending on what disease they're dealing with, renal disease is a key example. It impacts their ability to taste and to smell, but they need to eat. So palatability is really important in these types of diets. Omega-3 fatty acids to help with inflammation. We'll get a little bit more information here in the next slide or two. And of course, those prebiotic fibers we were talking about. We also use what's called fermentation extracts, and these are actually the probiotics that we were talking about that are viable live organisms. Well, as you can imagine, when they go through an extrusion process, they may not stay viable for a long period of time. So if you can't guarantee that at 6 months out, you're going to have X number of viable organisms, then you really can't make a probiotic claim on a product. However, we know now through studies that even if those organisms are no longer alive, they still have enzymes within them that can help the animal who's eating that diet to digest certain foodstuffs. So we use about 6 different species of organisms, and we chose those because some of them have enzymes that are focused on proteins, some on fats, some on carbohydrates. And so even though that animal is sick and maybe not producing their own enzymes at the level they should, they can get some benefit from the enzymes from these non-viable organisms. So those are called fermentation extracts. And mixed fiber sources, as I said, we use a balance of 2 or 3 different fiber sources to give us that sweet spot between solubility and fermentability, to significantly reduce the time it takes to resolve diarrhea and get them back to a normal stool quality. Next slide, please. So we've done a lot of studies, and by the way, I didn't mention this early on, but I'm one of a team of technical service veterinarians that we have for our veterinary diets. We also have a team, I think the latest count is 7 nutritionists on board that do our formulations and are involved in our testing. One of our veterinarians also has a PhD in physiology, and she is very involved in our clinical studies. So the last few years, we've been lucky in getting studies done and abstracts presented at key conferences like the annual Veterinary Nutrition Association and Internal Medicine. So, you know, these diets have been out we're in our 6th year now. And we've got a pretty impressive body of research to go off of. So let me tell you about some of the research we've done with our GI diet. So these were done in both dogs and cats. And we chose to do this in a very high level shelter situation in LA because specifically the acute diarrhea situations were coming from a variety of causes. Some of them were parasitic, some of them were malnutrition, some of them were because they had a virus or a bacteria. So we did obviously a different study in dogs and cats, and regardless of what the cause of their acute diarrhea, and acute just means that it has not been happening for more than 2 weeks. So it's a short-term diarrhea situation. And what we were able to determine was, compared to the dogs on the control diet, the dogs on the BLUE GI diet, we were able to resolve diarrhea a full day faster. And not only is that awesome for the dogs, because everybody's had diarrhea, you know how miserable you feel when you have diarrhea, but the people who have to clean up after these dogs, especially if you have hundreds of dogs in your care, it makes a big difference. And you know, so it's not only a kindness to the animals, but it's a kindness to the people who take care of them. On the cats, we were able to resolve the diarrhea a day and a half faster. So again, it's better for the animal. They feel better. They're going to eat better. They're going to, you know, get to a normal glow of health, if you will, and we can get them adopted out faster. Next slide, please. Now, one of the other studies we did, which I really appreciate from my years of having my own clinic, this is a study that was done in cats with chronic enteropathy. They had chronic diarrhea for longer than 6 months. And why this was important to me, because it at the time with my clients, even though they were very, very good in doing whatever I asked them to do, inevitably, we would have cats that just really didn't improve a whole lot. And the owners may make the decision to euthanize that animal. And I wish we had had this diet at the time I had my clinic, because I think it really would have made a huge difference. So this is what they call a blinded crossover study. Blinded means that the people who were administering the foods and taking care of the cats had no idea whether they were feeding the BLUE GI or the control diet. It was a crossover because we split the cats into two groups. They were randomly assigned to these two groups. All the cats were started on one of the two diets for 28 days. And then they were switched to the other diet for the other 28 days. So it removed a lot of the individual variation that you can see if they're not being exposed to both diets. The main focus on this study was stool quality. We wanted to get these cats to a normal or near normal stool quality and see how well the diet influenced that. So what we saw, so we were doing, every time these cats had a bowel movement, it was being recorded. We have a chart that gives you 5 different examples. So on one end of the chart, you've got like the rank diarrhea. We all know what that is, the real watery, nasty stuff. On the other extreme is the kind of the hard, dried stool that some animals will have. The ideal stool quality is going to be about a 3.5 on that scale. So with every one of these 20 cats, every time they had a bowel movement, we were grading it and making a record. What we found at the end of this study was that, and all cats were on each diet for 28 days, that 70% of the stools that the cats had when they were on our BLUE GI were normal or near normal. On the control diet, it was 53%. Now, granted, 70% is not 100%. But I think for some of my clients at the time, they would have said, you know what, I can live with that. And it might have made a difference for some of these cats. And it might make a difference in you being able to place a cat with chronic diarrhea, chronic enteropathy into a home. Obviously, they'll know what they're getting into, but it may save that animal's life. Next slide, please. So I do want to take a little bit of a look at, go ahead and click that again so we can get some other information up here. Looking at our GI and GI low fat, primarily the GI, looking at some of the competitive, what you're going to see shared, which is not surprising because the other GI diets out there, they're good diets. They use different ingredients, they're formulated slightly differently, but that, you know, there's room for variability and options. And as I said, not any diet is going to feed all of the animals out there equally. There's going to be some preferences. They're individual animals just like us. We've got preferences, but shared benefits. They're easily digestible. They're palatable. A number of them have growth indications. If you want to click that again. Our BLUE GI for the dog, the dry and wet are all life stages. So you can use the one product, whether it's young puppies or an adult dog, or a pregnant bitch or a nursing bitch. The BLUE GI cat wet is also all life stages. The dry is made for maintenance for adults. That doesn't mean you can't feed it to a kitten for a period of time. I just, depending on the age of the kitten, if they're 9 or 10 months old, I'll worry about it. Absolutely, they're close enough to mature height and weight. If they were 5 months old, I wouldn't have a problem feeding it for 2 to 3 weeks, but then I'd want to get them back onto an all life stages diet. Typically, you can get them past whatever their GI issue is and then put them back on either the regular GI, the canned, or onto another diet. Points of differences that can make your selection. Higher levels of omega-3s, and this is really significant with the omega-3s because when cells break, the cell membranes have both omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in them in the membrane. When that cell breaks, whether it's a natural cell death or from trauma or from damage, they release those omega-3s, and those omega-3s and omega-6s get metabolized. Well, the omega-6s, when they're metabolized, they start an inflammatory process. Go ahead and click us again and see. So with this, when we feed omega-3s at a higher level, it's going to be incorporated into the cell membranes. The level or the balance of omega-3s to omega-6s is totally dependent on what they eat and how much omega-3s is available. So when that cell membrane breaks, which it will, whether naturally or because of trauma, with the higher omega-3s, we have a lower inflammation. We talked about the mixed fibers and the studies that we've done to help resolve diarrhea. And I'll let you click that again. And the fermentation extracts that can aid in the digestion. Another click. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. Now, I went middle of the road because you know Royal Canin and Hills have a ton of GI diets, but we wanted to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So our GI support, and this product that's shown here is actually the dog product, dry. Hills ID, the Royal Canin moderate calorie, and the Purina EN. And again, these are all fine diets, okay? I'm not about to bash anybody's diet, and I've had years at Royal Canin. They make great products. That doesn't mean they're the only ones who can make great products, though. So let's take a look at some of the key nutrients. Protein, the 4 diets are really pretty close. The Royal Canin is a lower protein. They're still at a level that's appropriate for an adult maintenance, so not an issue there. Fat level, 3 of them are pretty close. Again, the Royal Canin moderate calorie is going to be a little lower fat. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. When we get to a lower fat, sometimes it impacts the palatability of the diet. So that might be an issue with a pet readily eating it. Now look at the fiber source. So we talked about the fiber package and getting that fermentability and the prebiotic fibers in there and what a difference that can make. So we're about 4.7 on a dry matter basis. Hills is a 2.5. Now Royal Canin is pretty comparable at 4. Purina is only 1.6. So that can make a big difference in helping get the gut back to a normal function faster. And then let's look at those omega-3s. Ours is at a 1.1%, again, a dry matter basis. Hills has nothing listed for their omega-3s. We've got 3 times the level that Royal Canin does, and more than 4 times the level of omega-3s that Purina does. That's a significant difference. It's a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. Now, as far as the calorie concentrations, they're really pretty close, pretty comparable. So it just, sometimes it's the things you have to know what to look for in comparison. But you may find one product works better on a particular dog than another, and that's just trial and error. But for the overall category, you can't go wrong with our Blue GI support. It's a great product. We've got studies behind it, and the palatability is really good. Next slide, please. All right. Do we have time for questions, or did I use up all our time?
Lots of great information. Thank you, Dr. Jones. We've had a ton of great questions, both from the registration and here in the chat as you've been chatting, Dr. Jones, but we're running out of time today and we have some lots of great content still up ahead. So what we're going to do is take all your questions, share those with Dr. Jones, and we will get answers back to you.
Excellent.
So look for a reply on the questions.
That sounds great.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jones.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Jones. That was awesome. I definitely learned some new information there. So if this GI diet sounds right for your needs, we have some amazing news. Shelters United has sourced some awesome members-only exclusive offers. If you buy a bag of any of the Blue diets, you'll get a free 12-can case of the Blue GI canned, wet, or dog food. And all Blue diets are 15% off, plus you get free next day shipping. We've been talking a lot about gastrointestinal support today, but there's a whole line of BLUE Natural Veterinary Diets like weight management and urinary care, kidney and mobility support, hydrolyzed diet for food intolerance, and if you purchase any of these diets, you'll get the 15% off plus your free case of GI. Next, please. And that's just one of the ways that Shelters United helps our members maximize their savings. Shelters United leveled up their savings and saved an average of $1,857 for our members in 2020. In retail pricing through an online retailer like Chewy, Walmart, or Amazon, you get no discount. But when you open an account with MWI, you get the largest distributor network with over 50,000 products and 22 warehouses across the country, offering the same or next day shipping on tons of everyday low prices. But now level up again and add the Shelters United group discounts to save even more. Next, please. If you're interested in joining the Shelters United program and receiving the awesome benefits we mentioned today, reach out to one of our enrollment specialists. Our enrollment specialists explain the program benefits, and by the way, it's not just great discounts, provide custom pricing quotes so you can estimate how much we can help you save on the products you've already purchased, and help you set up the MWI distributor account so you can buy all of your supplies in one-stop shop with easy ordering and fast delivery. Shelters United is free to join. There are no minimum purchase requirements. There's no monthly spend amounts, and there's no contracts. Super important. We have a team that's always sourcing new partnerships to increase our group's buying power for deeper discounts. Next slide. If you're already a member, congratulations. Make sure you've connected with your member consultants who can help you maximize your savings by comparing products. Share your savings statement from the previous quarter or year. They can even help you navigate MWI's website. We check in with you periodically to see how you're doing and to share new promos, sales, and partnerships. The more members we enroll in the Shelters United program, the more negotiating power we have to bring you new products, promotions, and exclusive offers from our partners. If you know of an organization that could benefit from extra savings, please refer them to our website, www.sheltersunited.com, or drop their name and email in the chat and we will reach out to them.
Thank you, Danielle. If you have any questions for Danielle about the Shelters United program, enter that in the chat as well. We'll make sure that we get all of your questions answered. I did see a great question. Will this be shared? Yes, we will share a recording of this next week. So we'll get back to you on your questions and also to share the recording. And now we are going to be talking adoption marketing. If you followed our Shelters United Facebook page, Marcy is the voice of our Shelters United social page. She started in animal welfare as a part-time employee of an animal center, picking up social media because nobody else had time at the center to do it. So over a decade later, she's still using social media as an engine to save and enhance the lives of pets across the country. Marcy's career path has led her to a wide array of industries, including financial planning, animal welfare and advocacy, and virtual veterinary care services. She's also a veteran public speaker and has taught professional social media practices to animal shelters and rescues, empowering them to voice and share their unique missions online. She enjoys reading, gardening, and traveling with her family. She currently lives in San Diego with her husband and her cute rescue pup, Ginger. Please help me in welcoming Marcy.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see you here. I'm Marcy Gruby, and again, the social media manager here for Shelters United. I'm so honored to be here, and I'm really excited to share a few of the ways I have found success in helping pets with some challenging health issues find happy forever families. So let's get started on my first slide. All right. Limitations equal opportunities. Yes, it is true. As Dr. Jones said, many pets come in with their own backgrounds, stories, histories, challenges. These three are just a few whether it's an illness, a disease, or a surgery need, they can be overwhelming for potential adopters, obviously, without any prior education about that issue is health-wise. Age is a factor sometimes. Senior pets can sometimes be overlooked by adopters. Health issues can be challenging or also cost prohibitive for some adopters who may not understand treatment options or treatment support. And behavior, well, we all have issues, but again, these can also overwhelm potential adopters without prior education as well. But we can reframe these limitations into opportunities and share why these pets are special and unique, and also educate our followers to help these pets find forever families. So instead of seeing these challenges as obstacles, I hopefully will turn your paradigm around a little bit today, and we can see them as opportunities. And what opportunities are they, Marcy? Well, we can use limitations to tell that pet story in a way that finds them a perfect forever family. And we can also educate fans or followers who may not be ready or available yet to adopt, but they may be in the future, and they can be better equipped for that time. We all know that social media is a game changer, not really just for pets, but for life. The little two critters on the left, if you guys know who they are, you can chat their name if you know them on Instagram. They're social media stars. But really, there's been a rise in awareness for senior or medically challenged pets through social media. The one on the very left is Marty. She's a sweet senior doggie who was adopted. She had vestibular disease, some major dental issues, was also partially blind, but at her time when she passed this time last year, she had 1.9 million followers on Instagram. That's how many people were in love with this little dog. The cat right next to her is my favorite. That's little Bub. And she had some genetic issues, osteoporosis, some feline dwarfism. But at the time of her passing, she had 3 million Facebook followers, which was so amazing. And why do you think these pets are so beloved on Instagram and social media? Well, they're special, they're unique, they're one of a kind, and their owners really showed the love and how their specialness really affected others and them. And you guys have special one of a kind pets as well in your facilities and organizations. The second reason on social media why these stories do so well is everyone loves a good comeback story, and especially now, we need good news more than ever. It's especially important today, and these two stories I found trolling peoplepets.com. They're really easy to find, and that's because people love them so much. The black lab and the little beautiful collar, her name is Wiggles, and she had a big tumor, which was benign, but she was overlooked at the shelter. She was at 5A's animal shelter, but she was adopted after 11 years, and she was adopted last month, which is really exciting. The two little pups on the right with the little heart bandanas, which I love, those are Reese and Coco from Northeast Animal Shelter. And they both recovered from parvo, and they also had patent ductus arteriosus. I said that right, Dr. Jones, I hope. And that means a blood vessel won't close properly. So they needed a heart surgery, which I thought was cute with the heart bandanas. And they both got their surgeries that they needed, and they were adopted this month too. But they were really popular on People Pets. People love these stories. And some of these pets get overlooked, but us as people, who else has felt overlooked, forgotten, and down on our luck? I think that's something we can all really relate to, especially your followers on social media, because we attach emotional meaning to these stories as people, which is why they're so important to us and why they resonate so much with us. So for the next 3 slides are 3 ways you can creatively tell these stories your one-of-a-kind pets. So next, please, to my favorite option, which is using pop culture, which I love pop culture. I go to Comic-Con every year, and I love it. It's so much fun. But remember when I said that good comeback stories, everyone loves a good comeback story? Well, pop culture is tons of good comeback stories, especially in, comic books, like Marvel movies that we all have watched. They seep into movies, books, music, comics, TV shows, all kinds of references. So these are two examples that I've used. One is Champion. And if you can guess where Champion comes from, which show, that's his meme on the left with Rob Lowe, literally. So chat up if you know what show Champion comes from. And the second story was 4 senior cats. And this is kind of a gimme, but they also came from a show. Their names were Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia, and they were all senior cats. And they were both stories that I worked on. Champion had a leg which was shattered in a few places when he came in. He would be a lot happier without that, caused him a lot of pain. So he was a tripod. And if you guess Parks and Rec, you're correct. He was literally the bravest pup that we knew, and we shared his story, and he was adopted right away. And the 4 senior cats obviously are from Golden Girls, and we use them to celebrate senior cats in that story, and they all found wonderful, happy, forever homes. And I am very sorry that there are no Schitt's Creek references. Next slide. We can also reframe the limitations so the adopter is more open and willing to learn and take in that story. And I try to reframe it into something that's more positive. Of course, we want to tell the truth about health and behavior issues. We always want to make sure that a doctor is supported, but if appropriate, making it lighthearted, fun to read, and especially educational helps adopters be open and accepting of a pet's health or behavior issue. So instead of saying hyperactive, you can reframe it as this dog is a health and wellness lover, or they're better than any Peloton trainer. I'm not a Peloton person, but I've heard those people are crazy inspiring and really get you engaged and out in the world. So you can always frame a pet that way. Another one is not good with pets. Perhaps you could say that they want nothing more than to be your only child, and that it's date night every single night. Never spend a night alone because you have your furry bestie with you. Try to think about it like a dating profile. We know that the one is out there, so we can frame a pet's characteristics again, so a adopter can perhaps be amused by them and intrigued and want to learn more, and be more open with learning about how they can be the correct or right match for that pet. And the last tip that I have is a good name can tell a pet's story. So who has time? Picture yourself. You're ready to write an adoption story. You sit down at your computer, there's classical music wafting from the other room, you have a steaming cup of tea next to you, and you have hours to craft the perfect adoption story. No one has time for that, nobody. So this is a really good way if you're just short on time, need some inspiration, or you can use it for a limitation perhaps. And these are 2 examples that I have worked on. There are 2 cats. One is Phoenix, was a Maine Coon kitty, and he came in and he had chemical burns on his paws and on his nose. So we had to wrap his paws with a vet wrap. But when he was all healed and ready, we said that he rose from the ashes to help find his forever family was the name that we chose. And the second one was Valentine, and Valentine had a heart murmur, but we said that his heart just couldn't contain all the love he had for his potential forever family. And it was around Valentine's Day too, so it was a nice seasonal tie-in as well, which totally works for a name. You can be seasonal. You could do flowers for spring right now. They can be related to events or celebrities. I know right now I'm probably the only one left watching American Idol, but I do. You could do Katy Perry from American Idol. And pro tip, if you do name them after a celebrity, you can tweet them to the celebrity and get them to notice their pets. You might get a retweet to get some extra eyes on that pet. So I hope these tips were helpful and helped inspire some creativity to market your adoptable pets. Remember to tug on those heartstrings. You guys have amazing stories there. I know you do. And people want to hear that good news. They want to hear those comeback stories. And we'll email all these tips to you. So don't worry if you're just tired and didn't write any notes, no worries. We'll send them all to you. But thank you so much for your dedication. I appreciate your hard work so much, and I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. That was certainly creative. Lots of great info there. And again, no time for questions, unfortunately. We want to be really sensitive for everyone's time. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Please ask any questions that you do have in that questions box. We will get back to you. We'll make sure that your question is heard and answered. And so that is it for today's webinar. I think we have one more slide of some very cute pets coming up, but just thank you so much to everyone for joining us today in our conversation. Thank you to our speakers for sharing your wisdom with us. We have one more thing at the end of this webinar. We would love to hear from you. Please share with us what you've learned and how we can make future webinars more impactful for you. If you could just take a second as you exit to answer those questions, that would be so amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye.